My parents declared a ruthless contest where just one child would inherit it all and the others would be cut off. So I reported them to CPS. The bottle in his shaking hand, the tiny white pills a stark contrast to his pale, drawn face. My twin brother Noah was on the edge of a darkness I couldn't comprehend, all because our parents had decided to turn our childhood into a brutal competition. I remember it like it was yesterday, the air thick with an unspoken dread. I was 16, Noah right beside me, our younger brother Lucas, 14, restless on the floor, and Sophia, 18, already a phantom of the woman she would become. Our parents had summoned us to the living room that evening, an assembly that felt less like a family gathering and more like a corporate board meeting. My father stood by the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid as if he were delivering a quarterly report to shareholders. My mother sat in her usual armchair, a leather-bound notepad open on her lap. For years, I'd seen her jotting things down, observing us with an intensity I dismissed as mere organizational prowess. Now, I see it for what it truly was, a meticulous, chilling record of our every move, each observation a potential weapon. My father's voice, devoid of warmth, cut through the quiet. He spoke of investments, of years spent raising 3 children, of money poured into each of us. But this, he declared, was an inefficient strategy. Their resources, he explained, would no longer be divided. Instead, they would concentrate everything, their estate, their attention, their love, on one child, the most successful, the one who demonstrated they truly earned it. The rest of us, he continued, would be removed from the will, cut off financially, and, upon turning 18, forced to leave the family permanently. Lucas, bless his innocent heart, hadn't quite grasped the gravity of it all. He piped up, asking if this was some kind of game show, when we'd find out who won. His small, hopeful questions, so out of place, only served to deepen the chill in the room. Sophia, on the cusp of adulthood, her face had gone absolutely white. She'd planned to attend an expensive private college, and our parents had promised to cover it. Her future, in that instant, seemed to shatter before her eyes. Noah, next to me on the couch, sat utterly motionless, his hands clenched tightly around his legs. I could feel the raw, humming tension radiating from him, even without touching. Dad continued, laying out the regulations with the precision of a business plan. We would be judged on academic performance, extracurricular achievements, leadership traits, and what he vaguely termed life readiness skills. Mom would update her rankings every single month, reflecting our development. Each of us would receive a score out of 100, dictating everything from our allowances to whether we were even allowed to participate in family events. The top kid would get all the benefits, all the investment. The rest of us, the bare minimum legally required until we'd be formally excised from their lives. Mom then opened her notepad to show us the first month's rankings. Sophia was in first place with a 92, Noah a distant third with a 67, and Lucas, tragically, last with a 60. She'd used some convoluted, sophisticated formula, concocted over the past year without a single word to us. Academic grades were 35%, extracurricular engagement 30%, household contributions 15%, and the insidious character evaluation accounted for 20%. That last bit I understood immediately was purely subjective, a tool she could look based on her observations. When I, foolishly, asked what would happen if we refused to participate, my father's countenance became icy in a way I had never seen before. The warmth drained from his eyes, replaced by a cold, hard glare that seemed to suck all oxygen from the room. We were already involved, he stated flatly, whether we liked it or not. We lived in his house, relied on his money, and followed his instructions. This wasn't about our success, it was about our obedience. Here's the thing about conditional love, it teaches children that their worth is not inherent, but rather a performance, leading to deep-seated insecurities and a constant need for external validation, twisting natural family bonds into a brutal zero-sum game. That night, after their lights clicked off, the 3 of us huddled in Sophia's room, a fragile circle against the encroaching darkness. Sophia was a whirlwind of anger and fear, pacing back and forth across the carpet, her footsteps muffled and frantic. She'd been their golden child her entire life, and suddenly, her very status felt challenged. Lucas was silently weeping, the small, shuddering gasps of a child who couldn't comprehend why his parents were doing this. Noah sat on the floor, his back pressed against the wall, his gaze fixed on nothing, a silent sentinel of despair. I, ever the pragmatist, tried to suggest we simply keep our usual routines, refused to compete. But Sophia quickly shut that down. If we didn't participate, she argued, she would automatically dominate the rankings, and we would all be eliminated, leaving her alone at the top. Noah, ever thoughtful, reminded us that declining to participate might be worse than competing. as Mom's subjective character judgment could penalize us for not even trying. We were stuck, caught in a system designed to throw us against one another, with no apparent way to escape without losing everything. But that was only the beginning of how quickly our family dynamics began to unravel. Within the first week, the competition's toxic tendrils snaked into everything. Mom put the monthly rankings on the refrigerator, a daily, inescapable reminder of our hierarchy. Sophia's name, naturally, was at the top in vivid green marker. Mine was second in blue. Noah's a distant third in yellow. Lucas's always at the bottom in a stark, damning red. Seeing our names organized in that cold, calculated order changed the very way we interacted. Sophia stopped assisting Lucas with his schoolwork. Raising his grades might, God forbid, lower her own rating. Noah, desperate to bridge the growing chasm between us, started staying awake until 30 a.m., tirelessly working on extra credit projects. I found myself continually checking in on what my siblings were up to, comparing my efforts to theirs. My mind, a constant calculator, terrified of falling behind. The monthly allowances, of course, mirrored our rankings perfectly. Sophia received a generous 200. I got 120. No, a 60. And Lucas, a paltry 25. Lucas, his voice small and confused, asked why his meager stipend had been decreased from the $6 he'd previously received. Dad, without a flicker of emotion, stated that limited resources needed to be allocated to the children who had the most promise. The casual cruelty of it made my stomach churn. What happened next, however, truly twisted the knife into our very souls. School, which had once been a refuge, transformed into a nightmare of incessant comparisons. Sophia and I were both juniors in the same high school, and every test score, every assignment grade, felt like ammunition for the competition. When she earned a 95 on a history test and I got a 91, I watched her beam, her eyes alight not with joy, but with cold calculation, as she mentally factored how it would affect the monthly rankings. When I secured a position on the debate team, and she didn't even get a call back, she spent the entire car ride home in seething silence, radiating an unspoken fury that was almost physical. Our parents had always championed academic excellence, but now it felt militarized, every achievement a battlefield. Every success I had posed a direct threat to Sophia's position, and every triumph she had pushed me further away from the precarious safety of acceptance. Noah, being in a different grade, was spared the direct classroom competition, but the strain on him was palpable. He had always been more artistic than scholarly, excelling at art and music, not math and science. Now, he was visibly straining, trying to force himself into a rigid mold that simply didn't fit who he truly was. His shoulders hunched, the light slowly draining from his eyes. The character evaluation category, always subjective, quickly evolved into a sophisticated weapon for psychological warfare. Mom would gleefully deduct points for things like an untidy room, speaking disrespectfully, or displaying a bad attitude. These were purely arbitrary assessments, allowing her to manipulate the rankings in any way she desired. Noah lost 5 character points when he dared to disagree with Dad about whether the tournament was fair. I lost 3 points after forgetting to take out the garbage, a simple oversight transformed into a character flaw. One night, Sophia, with chilling precision, seemed to realize that the best way to maintain her status was to be completely obedient and pleasant at all times, never challenging our parents' judgments. She morphed into an artificial replica of herself, always cheerful, always helping, always playing the part of the perfect daughter, her smile just a little too fixed, her movements a little too stiff. Lucas, 14 and still very much a child, struggled the hardest with this category. He lost points for leaving toys out, talking too loudly, and watching too much television, typical behaviors at his age, now transformed into glaring failures in Mom's twisted scoring system. Noah began experiencing panic attacks in the dead of night. I'd wake up to the horrific sound of him hyperventilating in the bathroom, his small, ragged breaths tearing through the quiet house. I'd sit outside the door, my voice a quiet anchor, guiding him through breathing exercises until his tremors subsided and his fear-filled eyes regained a flicker of their former self. He was terrified of finishing last, of being completely cut off. Our parents had made it devastatingly clear the child who finished last would receive nothing, no college fund, no family link, no help whatsoever after the age of 18. Noah had 2 more agonizing years until that deadline, and the prospect of being homeless and alone at 18 gnawed at his very soul. I tried to reassure him, to promise that I wouldn't let that happen, that we would stick together regardless of the rankings. But we both knew, deep down, that I was simply another child caught in the same system, utterly powerless to protect him if our parents decided to completely abandon him. But the insidious nature of this game wasn't just breaking us emotionally, it was physically reshaping our home. The domestic contribution category transformed our family life into a competitive nightmare of duties and obligations. Sophia, in a desperate bid for points, began waking up around 50-odd a.m. to clean up the kitchen before anyone else could lay a finger on it. I found myself performing yard work and making minor repairs that no one had even requested, simply to earn additional points. Noah, in a heartbreaking act of fraternal loyalty, took up all of Lucas's allotted responsibilities and completed them himself, knowing Lucas was too young to meet Mom's unrealistic expectations. We were locked in a silent competition to see who could devote more time and energy to housework, transforming basic household obligations into a frantic, anxiety-ridden ranking system. Mom kept a meticulous journal of everything we performed, timing how long each chore took, and grading the quality of our work with an almost sadistic precision. She'd inspect the bathroom after someone had cleaned it, deducting points if she discovered a single stray hair in the sink or a faint smudge on the mirror. The home had never been cleaner, shining with a sterile, unsettling perfection, but it had also never seemed more unfriendly, more devoid of comfort or belonging. 6 months into this hell, Lucas began peeing the bed again, something he hadn't done since he was 7. The immense burden of being in last place, of constantly witnessing our parents' sad, disapproving expressions, was tearing him down, piece by agonizing piece. He was 14 years old and utterly convinced he was a failure, simply because he couldn't compete with children 4 and 6 years his senior. I found him weeping in the garage one afternoon, a crumpled heap of despair. He confessed he wished he had never been born, so our parents wouldn't have to be so disappointed in him. That moment shattered something deep within me. I stormed into my parents' bedroom, my voice raw with a desperate plea for them to cease the competition. I told them what they were doing to Lucas, how he was visibly breaking down under the relentless pressure. My father listened, his face an emotionless mask, then remarked with chilling detachment that Lucas needed to learn that life is about competition and disappointment. If he couldn't handle pressure now, he asserted, he'd never survive in the real world. The words hung in the air, cold and definitive, sealing Lucas's fate in their eyes. This was a classic case of parental projection, where our parents, perhaps unconsciously, imposed their own anxieties about success and failure onto us. By framing it as life readiness, they disguised severe emotional neglect, fostering a brutal scarcity mindset that poisoned our family, making love feel like a reward, not a given. The extracurricular category added yet another layer of suffocating competitiveness. Sophia joined every club and organization she could find the time for, spreading herself thin in a frantic effort to build an impressive resume. I, on the other hand, focused on fewer activities, but strove for leadership roles, eventually becoming president of the debate team and captain of the academic quiz bowl. Noah, tragically, suffered the most in this category, as the majority of his interests lay in areas our parents simply didn't value. They granted him pitiful points for his art portfolio, but maximum scores for the scientific Olympiad. So, he abandoned the one thing that brought him joy, sacrificing his own passion to earn points in things he despised. Lucas attempted joining various sports teams, but was often cut, being undersized for his age and not particularly athletic. Every rejection, every failure, felt like further proof that he was the family's designated failure. Mom's scoring system, of course, only considered quantitative outcomes, offering no consideration for effort or progress. Either you won prizes and leadership positions, or you received meager, insulting points. After a year of this relentless torment, Sophia was accepted into Yale's highly regarded summer program. It would undoubtedly, dramatically improve her rating and look spectacular on her college applications. The program cost her $10,000 for 6 weeks, and our parents, wealthy as they were, had the money to send her easily. But Dad, ever the manipulator, sat us all down for supper, announcing that if Sophia went to Yale, there would be insufficient funds for the rest of us to participate in any summer activities. He could send one child to an exceptional program, he offered, or all 3 to regular camps and programs. He then, with a theatrical flourish, asked for a vote on what he should do. Sophia, without hesitation, quickly voted for Yale, claiming that investing in the most successful kid made the most sense. Lucas, his face a picture of yearning, supported fair distribution. He'd been eagerly looking forward to soccer camp all year. Noah and I were caught in the cruel middle, knowing that either option would inevitably harm someone. I voted for fair distribution, unable to bear the thought of Lucas losing his only hobby. Noah, with a weary sigh, voted the same way. Dad, his face a mask of disappointment, seemed displeased with all of us except Sophia. That summer, none of us got to pursue our favorite activities. Sophia didn't go to Yale. Lucas didn't attend soccer camp. Noah missed out on the art intensive he had so desperately yearned for. I didn't participate in the debate institute I had planned. Instead, we all stayed home, where Mom assigned us even more housekeeping tasks, and our parents lectured us endlessly on the dire consequences of indecision. It was then that I truly understood the competition was more than just selecting one successful child. It was about training us to sacrifice one another, to prioritize individual progress over familial loyalty, and to embrace the brutal notion that someone had to suffer for anyone to succeed. We had failed that cruel lesson by attempting to remain unified, and our parents were punishing us for it. The summer that followed would reveal the true, devastating cost of this warped ideology. Noah's mental health, already fragile, continued to deteriorate alarmingly. He stopped eating regularly, dropping weight until his clothing draped loosely over his emaciated frame. He abandoned his art completely, letting go of the one thing that had once brought him genuine happiness. He spent most of his time locked in his room, studying things he despised, frantically attempting to raise his rating. When I, worried sick, asked him how he was doing, he would simply answer, "Fine," in a flat, vacant tone that screamed the opposite. I tried to convince our parents that something was gravely wrong, but they casually dismissed my worries as mere competitive manipulation. Noah's mother explained, with a dismissive wave of her hand, that he was only feeling the usual stress of falling short of expectations, and that he should strive harder rather than seeking pity. Dad, with equal indifference, encouraged me to focus on my own rating rather than worrying about my sibling. They didn't see, or perhaps didn't care, that the rivalry they'd fostered was slowly, brutally, destroying one of their own children from the inside out. The monthly rankings themselves grew increasingly arbitrary, as Mom shamelessly modified her scoring formula to preserve the desired hierarchy. When my grades began to consistently outpace Sophia's, Mom abruptly upped the weight of the character evaluation area, conveniently allowing her to penalize me points for completely subjective reasons. When Noah, through sheer force of will, momentarily surpassed me in extracurricular points, the model suddenly shifted, prioritizing leadership positions above mere participation. It became painfully clear that Mom had already determined Sophia would win, and the entire ranking system was just for show, a cruel pantomime to make it appear like a fair battle. Yet, we couldn't definitively prove the system was rigged without access to her specific formula and computations, which she kept locked away in her office, a fortress of deception. We were compelled to continue performing in a competition where the winner had already been predetermined, prisoners in our own home. And as the game continued, its grip tightened, forcing one of us to break in a way none of us could ignore. Lucas began his 12th grade year by acting out in ways that were utterly out of character for him. He got into fights at school, his frustration bubbling over. He spoke back to teachers, a defiant streak I hadn't seen before. He stopped completing his schoolwork altogether. His grades, once a mix of B's and C's, plummeted to D's and F's. When our parents confronted him, his expression was vacant, almost serene. He stated there was no use in trying because he knew he'd never catch up to the rest of us. He'd coldly calculated that even if he achieved perfect marks in every single area, his age and the points he'd already lost would keep him firmly in last place. So, he reasoned, why bother trying? Mom and Dad were outraged, their voices sharp with fury, but I understood, with a painful clarity, what Lucas was doing. He was opting out of the competition in the only way he could, by refusing to care about the very measures our parents used to evaluate him. It was self-destructive, yes, but it was also the last desperate shred of control he had left, a quiet, heartbreaking defiance. Midway through my junior year, Mr. Whitfield, our guidance counselor, summoned me to his office. He'd noticed troubling tendencies in my case. My grades, he conceded, were outstanding, but I had inexplicably discarded some hobbies I used to genuinely enjoy, embracing others that clearly held no interest for me. He inquired, gently, if everything was well at home, and for the first time, I considered telling an adult what was truly happening. But what could I say? My folks weren't breaching the law. They were feeding and lodging us, not physically harming us in any conventional sense. They were just organizing a competition to choose which youngster deserved to remain in the family. How do you describe that to someone who doesn't live inside its twisted reality? I assured Mr. Whitfield that everything was great, that I was simply attempting to improve my college applications. He stared at me with a mournful face, as if he knew I was lying, but understood he couldn't force me to reveal the truth. It was that very night, the memory still makes my blood run cold, that I went to Noah's room and found him holding a bottle of our mother's sleeping pills. He'd already swallowed 5 of them, his eyes distant, unfocused, clutching the bottle as he contemplated whether to take more. My heart leaped into my throat, a cold wave of terror washing over me. I seized the tablets from his trembling hand and shook him violently, demanding, my voice a desperate whisper, what he was doing. He stated, his voice hollow, that he couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't bear the thought of waking up every day to the crushing prospect of failure. He couldn't spend another 2 years attempting to win a tournament that was structured to ruin 3 out of 4 of us. I reminded him, tears blurring my own vision, that he was not failing, but that our parents were failing us. I stayed in his room all night, a silent guardian, ensuring he did not try anything else. And in the morning, a fierce resolve burning within me, I marched downstairs to tell our parents what had occurred. My father predictably responded by saying, with infuriating calm, that Noah was deceptive and merely used suicide threats to get sympathy. My mother, without missing a beat, deducted 10 character points for emotional instability. They did not take him to see a doctor or a therapist. They did not cease the competition. They just punished him for crumbling under the unbearable pressure they had created. It was then, in that moment of absolute despair, that I knew I had to fight fire with fire. I began documenting everything after that. I kept a small notebook, concealed in a loose floorboard in my closet, where I meticulously recorded the monthly rankings, the arbitrary formula revisions, the unachievable standards, and the horrifying psychological devastation I witnessed in my brothers. I had no idea what I would do with this paperwork, but I knew I had to keep some type of record of what was going on. I wanted proof that we weren't crazy, that the situation was as ridiculous, as cruel, as it appeared. Sophia, one day, while searching for something in my room, stumbled upon my journal. She read it, her face contorting with rage, and immediately attacked me, accusing me of plotting to harm her family, to ruin her chances. She threatened that if I revealed that notebook to anyone outside the home, she'd notify our parents, and I'd be severely punished. I asked her, my voice trembling, how she could possibly justify what they were doing to us. Her answer was cold and devoid of empathy. She was protecting her future. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much to have me damage her chances of winning. Maybe she was correct. Perhaps I was jealous. Perhaps I was just afraid of what this competition was doing to all of us. The aftermath of that failed intervention was a bitter pill to swallow, but it would also become the catalyst for my own desperate measure. As the tournament limped into its 2nd year, the long-term psychological effects became too obvious to overlook, too devastating to ignore. Sophia had developed a severe eating disorder, obsessively controlling her food intake, because she had convinced herself that maintaining a certain weight allowed her greater control over her chaotic life, her once vibrant cheeks now gaunt. Lucas had been suspended from school twice for fighting, his pent-up rage finding an outlet in physical altercations, and was now seeing the school counselor on a weekly basis for anger management concerns. Noah had stopped sleeping more than 4 hours each night, his mind a constant whirlwind of anxiety, and developed stress-related dermatitis on his arms, angry red patches that were a visible manifestation of his inner turmoil. I found myself unable to enjoy anything anymore, my mind perpetually calculating whether an action would benefit or harm my standing. We were all playing warped versions of ourselves, caricatures our parents had created, and somewhere along the road we had utterly lost sight of who we truly were beneath the facade. Just when we thought the torment couldn't get any worse, our parents unveiled their final, cruel twist. The summer before my senior year, they declared that the rankings would continue throughout college. They'd pay for one child's entire education, half of the fees for the second-place child, modest assistance for the third-place youngster, and nothing, absolutely nothing, for the fourth. This meant the competition would stretch on for another 4 grueling years, locking us in this suffocating system until our early 20s. Sophia was ecstatic. First place came with complete financial independence, a prize she had been relentlessly pursuing. The rest of us recognized, with a crushing despair, that we'd never truly be free of our parents' grip as long as they held this financial leverage over us. I began feverishly looking into scholarships and financial assistance, mentally preparing for the very real prospect of having to afford college entirely on my own. Noah did the same, meticulously researching colleges with robust financial aid programs. Lucas, only 13, couldn't quite grasp the far-reaching implications, But I could see the deepening despair in his eyes as he understood that this nightmare would characterize his entire youth. As my senior year began, Sophia was still ahead with 90 points, followed by myself with 84, Noah with 82, and Lucas with a demoralizing 58. The distance between first and last place had swelled to 32 points, making it virtually impossible to close in the few months left until Sophia turned 18. She had practically won, not just through constant results, but by benefiting from Mom's undeniable affection and manipulation of the rules. Nevertheless, our parents, with unyielding conviction, continued to administer the tournament, emphasizing the never-ending need for every one of us to strive, compete, and demonstrate our elusive value. Noah and I, driven by a primal urge for escape, applied to institutions that offered full-ride scholarships and generous financial aid. We were meticulously plotting our escape routes, even as we continued to compete in a tournament that offered us no other option. But the darkest hour was yet to come, and it would start with Lucas. In December of my senior year, a chilling shift occurred. Lucas stopped attending school totally. He'd wake up, dress, leave the house with his bag, and spend the entire day in the public library or simply wandering the city streets, a ghost in plain sight. He'd return home at the usual school closing hours, a master of deception, so our parents wouldn't notice his absences. He maintained this clandestine routine for 3 weeks before the school inevitably notified our parents of his alarming truancy. The confrontation that ensued was nasty, venomous. Dad shouted at Lucas, his voice laced with disgust, accusing him of squandering his future and his few remaining possibilities. Mom, with a chillingly swift hand, revised his ranking to 52 points, the lowest any of us had ever received. Lucas simply stood there, his shoulders slumped, accepting their condemnation without a single word of defense, his expression utterly blank, devoid of emotion. After our parents stormed away, I asked him, my voice barely a whisper, why he had quit attending school. He claimed it didn't matter anymore. Nothing he accomplished would matter, he said, so why bother trying? His voice was hollow, the hope utterly extinguished. I told him it mattered to me, but he simply turned and walked away, a silent testament to the wreckage they had created. That was my absolute breaking point. I gathered my documentation journal, the meticulously recorded proof of ranking changes, and the chilling evidence of the psychological harm we'd endured, and I immediately scheduled an appointment with a family therapist whom my school counselor had cautiously suggested. Her name was Dr. Simmons, and I spent 2 hours in her office, pouring out every single detail. She listened without interrupting, taking notes in a manner that reminded me terrifyingly of my mother. After I finished, the silence stretching between us, she asked if I felt physically safe at home. I said yes. We weren't being attacked or starving or anything like that. Then she asked if I felt emotionally safe, and I had no answer. How do you assess emotional safety when you're continuously assessed and graded, when 3 out of 4 of you are deemed unworthy of being a member of your own family? Dr. Simmons laid bare the clinical term for our suffering conditional love and favoritism abuse. This insidious form of psychological manipulation, she explained, systematically erodes a child's self-worth, creating a toxic environment where love is weaponized and individual identities are crushed under the weight of unrealistic, competitive demands. She inquired whether I wanted her to report it to Child Protective Services. I sat in her office, the weight of that decision pressing down on me, trying to decide whether reporting would genuinely help or make matters unimaginably worse. CPS investigations are messy and intrusive, and they don't always produce the desired results. We could easily end up in foster care, separated from one another, which, in my terrified mind, felt even worse than being together under our parents' cruel supervision. But if I didn't report it, nothing would ever change. Lucas would continue to unravel, a silent collapse. Noah would keep taking my mother's sleeping pills, inching closer to the abyss. Sophia would continue to starve herself, a self-imposed penance. And I would plan my escape, leaving my siblings to suffer alone. Dr. Simmons then stated, her voice firm but kind, that she was a mandated reporter, which meant that if she considered us to be in danger, she had to report it, regardless of my wishes. She asked me directly whether I believed my siblings were in danger. And I thought about Noah with the medication bottle, the blank, defeated expression on Lucas's face, and the hollow, empty cheeks of Sophia. With a shuddering breath, I said yes. The CPS inquiry began the very next week. Patricia Okonkwo, a caseworker, arrived at our house unannounced, her presence a jarring intrusion into our carefully constructed FI-aid. She demanded to talk with each of us separately. Our parents were furious, their eyes blazing with a mixture of anger and panic, wanting to know who had reported them and what malicious falsehoods had been uttered. Patricia remained cool and professional, stating simply that she was there to assure our safety and well-being. She questioned all three of us in separate rooms, her questions probing into our everyday lives and interactions with our parents. I told her everything, showing her my meticulously kept documentation log, describing the ranking system in excruciating detail. Sophia, however, staunchly supported our parents, arguing vehemently that they were only encouraging us to realize our full potential. Noah and Lucas, their voices quieter, validated my tale to varying degrees of detail, their fear still tangible. Patricia spent 3 hours at our house, methodically photographing the ranking charts on the refrigerator and requesting copies of Mom's scoring diaries. My parents, shrewd and cunning, were savvy enough to present the rating system as harsh but perfectly lawful parenting. They highlighted, with smug self-satisfaction, that the three of us were fed, sheltered, educated, and not physically mistreated. They presented the competition as a motivating framework, cleverly disguised as a tool meant to teach us about real-world pressure. They even offered Mom's detailed records as proof of involved parenting, not psychological manipulation. Patricia spoke with our teachers, our pediatrician, and other family members. The majority of them, caught in the web of appearances, agreed that we seemed like high-achieving children from a strict yet prosperous home. The exterior appearance differed so greatly from the interior truth that it was nearly impossible to definitively prove abuse had occurred. Patricia informed me privately, her voice filled with a quiet frustration, that she trusted my story, but she simply did not have the legal grounds to remove us from the house. The condition, she conceded, was damaging, but not unlawful. She suggested family therapy and promised to check in periodically, but she couldn't persuade our parents to cease their cruel competition. The aftermath of that failed intervention was a bitter pill to swallow, but it would also become the catalyst for my own desperate measure. After the CPS inquiry concluded without action, my parents' simmering rage, previously diffused, was directed with laser-like precision solely at me. They knew I had reported them, even if I hadn't confessed it outright. Mom, in a vindictive display of power, decreased my ranking to 65 points, placing me lower than Noah for the first time, citing catastrophic inadequacies in my character evaluation. Dad informed me, his voice dripping with contempt, that I had betrayed the family and, in doing so, had demonstrated precisely why I didn't deserve their support. Sophia stopped speaking to me completely, as if I had personally harmed her by calling CPS. Only Noah and Lucas, my two remaining allies, understood why I did it, but they were too terrified to defend me publicly. To protect my siblings, I had given up my place in the competition, sacrificed my standing, and most likely, my connection with my parents. And it had done nothing. The rankings continued. Psychological warfare persisted. We were still stuck, prisoners in a home that had become a battlefield. The college acceptance letters began arriving in March, each envelope a flutter of hope and despair. I was accepted into 3 institutions that offered full scholarships, a lifeline that meant I could leave without relying on my parents for anything. Sophia, of course, was accepted into 7 famous institutions, and my parents threw her a lavish celebratory party, proudly declaring that they would cover her full tuition and expenses wherever she chose. Noah, with limited financial aid, enrolled at a public school, and our parents, with a sigh of reluctant generosity, agreed to support 20 of his expenditures, leaving him to sort out the remaining 80%. Lucas, still only 14, watched the significantly different celebrations for each of our acceptances, and the stark contrast showed him exactly what his future would be like, in last position, scarcely recognized, and destined to fend for himself. The quiet slump of his shoulders, the shadow in his eyes, spoke volumes. I had one last, searing discussion with Sophia before leaving for college. I asked her, my voice heavy with emotion, if winning was truly worth losing her brothers, worth witnessing Lucas break apart, worth nearly attempting suicide. She looked at me, her expression unreadable, and told me I was overreacting, that everything was perfectly fine, and that we'd all eventually thank our parents for pushing us to achieve such greatness. I inquired if she truly believed that, or whether she was simply rationalizing her decision to participate with their maltreatment. Her eyes, now cold and distant, narrowed. She told me I was envious and resentful over not winning, and that I should concentrate on my own life rather than attempting to bring her down. We have not spoken since that discussion. When I finally moved into my dorm in August, she did not assist me pack or even say goodbye. Neither did my parents. Only Noah and Lucas, my 2 precious brothers, came to see me depart. We stood in the driveway, locked in a tight embrace, and we all grieved, silent tears streaming down our faces, because we knew I was going to escape. But they remained in the nightmare. Distance couldn't erase the scars, and the nightmare for those I left behind was far from over. College physically distanced me from the competition, yet I couldn't stop thinking about my brothers. Noah emailed me regular, heartbreaking updates on the standings and Lucas's steady, agonizing decline. Lucas had been diagnosed with depression and prescribed medication, but our parents, with typical callousness, saw it as yet another failure on his part. They deducted character points for him requiring mental care. Noah, trapped and desperate, counted down the days until he turned 18 and could legally leave. I sent money from my work, study position whenever I could, knowing he desperately needed help paying for college, which our parents steadfastly refused to finance. Patricia from CPS continued to do monthly check-ins, a token gesture, but nothing ever changed because nothing, technically, criminal was occurring. Only 3 children were being slowly devastated by a competition designed to persuade them that their value was entirely conditional. I did not go home for the summer following my freshman year. I stayed at school to work and take summer courses, my excuse a fragile shield. My parents wrote me a stiff, formal email, indicating they were upset with my decision, but not surprised, considering my character flaws. Sophia, ever the performer, shared images on social media of their opulent family trip without me, the 3 of them perfectly posed, smiling happily on an expensive beach. Lucas, in the background, appeared skinny and desperately sad in the photographs. Sophia looked triumphant, a victor, but Noah, in every picture, appeared to be a ghost, his eyes hollow. The evident winner posed with our parents, as if she had won her position through sheer superiority, rather than through a brutal process of survival. I felt a strange, unsettling combination of loss, rage, and profound relief that I wasn't present, that I had come out, even if it meant being systematically removed from family memory. But the echoes of their twisted game wouldn't truly fade until one final, shocking revelation. Noah turned 18 in October. He contacted me from a bus stop at 3000 a.m., his voice raspy with relief and fear. He said he had simply departed, packed a single suitcase, and strolled out when everyone was asleep. He planned to arrive in his college town early and find lodging and a job until school began. Our parents, true to form, did not attempt to stop him or even bother to call him. They simply changed the rankings, now displaying only 2 children instead of 3, rearranging the percentages so Lucas sank even lower, plummeting deeper into the abyss. Sophia was still ahead with 90 points. Despite not having lived at home for nearly a year, I still finished second with 75 points, a perverse testament to their enduring control. Lucas was last with a heartbreaking 53 points. The tournament continued, a gullish shadow, despite the fact that half of the competitors had already gone. Lucas began contacting me every single night throughout my sophomore year. He'd chat about his day, his homework, or sometimes nothing in particular, and I understood, with a painful clarity, that he just wanted to hear the voice of someone who cared for him as a person, not as a rating, not as a numerical value. He was 14, utterly alone with our parents and Sophia, all of whom, he knew, believed he was the family's greatest failure. He told me how they'd stopped inviting him to family dinners sometimes, coldly telling him he could eat in his room because he wasn't contributing substantially to household conversations. He mentioned how Sophia now had her own gleaming automobile, whilst he still had to take the bus everywhere, a constant reminder of his lower status. He remarked that his birthday had passed with only a curt letter from our parents, no celebration, no gifts, no acknowledgement of his existence. He was progressively being wiped from the family, slowly erased, while still living physically within their home, and I couldn't do much to defend him from 2,500 miles away. Then, a phone call, late at night, shattered everything we thought we knew about our parents' grand design. The true breaking point occurred during Lucas's first year of high school. He contacted me at midnight, weeping so hard that I could not hear his words, only the raw, guttural sobs tearing through the phone. When he eventually calmed himself enough to speak, his voice trembling, he revealed that he had located Mom's master plan paper on her computer. A comprehensive timetable, chilling in its precision, revealed that after Sophia, age 22, had graduated from college, our parents would officially disown the rest of us. They'd already created legal paperwork to remove Noah, Lucas, and myself from their will. They'd even sent preliminary letters to extended relatives, coldly explaining why they were separating from 3 of their 4 children. They had meticulously estimated how much money they would save if they only invested in Sophia. They'd been meticulously preparing this for 3 years, and the entire competition, with its calculated cruelty, had only served to make us complicit in our own demise. Lucas read sections of the letter to me over the phone, and I felt physically nauseous hearing our parents describe us as lousy investments and failed experiments. I traveled home the very next morning, skipping lessons that I couldn't afford to miss. I picked up Noah from his college town on the way. We arrived at the house and immediately ordered a family meeting, my voice ringing with a newfound authority. Our parents, to my surprise, remained eerily calm when I confronted them with what Lucas had discovered. I questioned how they could do this to their own children, how they could deliberately ruin 3 children while elevating only one. My father retorted, his voice devoid of regret, that they had given us several opportunities to demonstrate our worth, and we had failed. He stated, with chilling finality, that it was irresponsible to continue investing in youngsters who had not shown an adequate return on that investment. My mother went on to say that Sophia had earned her position through commitment and brilliance, but the rest of us had simply demonstrated that we did not love family enough to strive for it. Sophia sat there passively, her expression inscrutable, not defending us, not defending them, a silent accomplice. I informed my parents, my voice shaking with a righteous fury, that they had abused 3 children through competitiveness and conditional affection. I stated, my eyes locked on theirs, that I had 3 years of meticulously collected paperwork confirming the psychological trauma they had caused, and that I was willing to take it to attorneys, therapists, and the media if they did not stop. My father scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips, saying I had no legal standing, no evidence of any criminal activity, and certainly no resources to challenge them. He was correct in all of this, but I also had something he didn't expect. I had been filming the entire conversation on my phone since the minute we sat down. In that raw, unedited tape, they acknowledged their intention to disown 3 of their children based on a rating system that they had manipulated for years. It may not have been unlawful, but it provided devastating evidence of their genuine intentions, their cold, calculated cruelty. I watched their expressions alter, a flicker of panic in their eyes as the weight of my words, backed by undeniable proof, settled over them. I told them I wanted the competition to finish immediately. I wanted Lucas's living circumstances to change dramatically, to be granted the privacy and respect he deserved, and I wanted them to consent to family therapy with an outside counselor. Or, I warned, the video would be given to everyone we knew, including our church community, extended relatives, and co-workers. I would ensure that everyone realized exactly what they had done. It was blackmail, plain and simple, and I was not proud of it, but I had no other alternatives for defending my younger brother. My parents were silent for a long, agonizing time, the only sound the frantic thumping of my own heart, until my father, his face ashen, finally agreed to my requests. We had won the battle, but the war had already claimed casualties that would never truly heal. That day, the ranking charts fell from the refrigerator, their colorful markers now fading, insignificant. The monthly reviews, the insidious scoring ended. Lucas was granted privacy and respect, something he had been denied for years. We began family therapy the very next week, but my parents spent most of the sessions attempting to persuade the therapist that they had been misunderstood, that their intentions were pure. The harm, however, had already been done, deep and irreparable. Sophia completed college with full parental support exactly as planned, and promptly cut off all communication with me, Noah, and Lucas. She had internalized the message that we were failures who would only drag her down, and she prioritized our parents' favor over any sibling relationships. I'd lost my oldest sister to the competition, despite the fact that I technically won the last bout. Noah took 6 grueling years to complete college, working full-time to pay for it without any parental assistance, a quiet testament to his resilience. Lucas, now 16, lived in a family where the competition had technically stopped, but the hierarchy and favoritism, the lingering shadow of their game, persisted. He counted the days until he could depart for college and never return. I graduated with debt from the years I worked 2 jobs and took extra semesters to support my own bills, since full-time tuition alone was prohibitively expensive. The 3 of us had survived, yes, but our parents' actions had left us all deeply, fundamentally damaged. 3 years after the competition officially concluded, I received a call from Patricia Okonkwo, the CPS caseworker who had attempted, with quiet determination, to assist us. She was drafting a paper on long-term psychological maltreatment in high-achieving families and requested permission to incorporate our story anonymously. I readily agreed, and spent 2 hours on the phone with her, meticulously explaining the competition and its devastating consequences. She told me she'd seen dozens of situations like ours, families whose parents devised intricate, often brilliant, mechanisms to throw children against one another in the name of motivation. She said that the majority of these insidious incidents went unreported because the abuse was so nuanced and clever, disguised behind seemingly innocuous ideals such as healthy competition and high standards. She was attempting to provide better frameworks for recognizing and intervening in these harrowing situations. I handed her my documentation diary, the recording of that final confrontation, and my full permission to use anything she needed. If our pain, our shattered childhoods, could somehow save other families from going through the same tragedy, it could have been worthwhile. Lucas departed for college last year with a full scholarship to a school 2,500 miles away. He contacted me from his dorm room, weeping with unadulterated joy, ecstatic that he had finally, truly, escaped. He's now dealing with a trauma therapist and, slowly, painfully, establishing an identity independent from the rankings and the relentless competitiveness that once defined him. Noah is currently working in technology and has, with a quiet strength, broken off all communication with our parents.